Welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council. It's October 20th, 2022, 6 o'clock. And Councilman Sean Wright has our prayer and our pledge.
Let's bow our heads. Lord, be with us as leaders of our city. Be with the leaders of our state and federal governments as well. Help us be the leaders you want us to be. Be with those that have spoken and unspoken prayers. It is your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's a special night. It's a special night and it's a sad night. But more that we get the opportunity to be able to present a proclamation to someone that I think that's special, not only to the city of Murfreesboro, to special to a lot of people that she has worked with and impacted. So, Melinda Tate, want to ask you to come up. So I have to start by telling y'all, 16 years ago, right? 16 years ago, Melinda and her late husband, Miles, had the idea that we would have a half marathon in the city of Murfreesboro. And so for 15 years, minus a COVID year, the city of Murfreesboro was blessed to be able to have a great event here in the city of Murfreesboro. I was fortunate for 10 of those years, the first 10 years, to be able to serve on the board, and Melinda ably told me exactly what I should do, when I should do it, and how I should do it the whole time that I served on that board. So, Melinda, it's my pleasure on behalf of the City Council tonight to present you a proclamation. This year was the last year of the middle half. After 15 years, the board decided that 15 years is a great run, and so I thought it was fitting to be able to present Melinda. It says, whereas the Murfreesboro Half Marathon was created by the vision of Miles and Melinda Tate, and whereas Melinda served as the race director from 2007 to 2016 and on the board of directors from 2017 to 2022, whereas there have been over 31,000 participants since the race inception, and whereas the Murfreesboro Half Marathon has inspired thousands of individuals to get active and embrace a healthier lifestyle, and whereas the Murfreesboro Half Marathon has donated over $450,000 to local charities and nonprofits over these past 15 years. In 2019, the Murfreesboro Half Marathon established the Miles and Melinda Tate Scholarship for juniors, and the Murfreesboro Middle Half Scholarship has provided over $50,000 in financial assistance for MTSU students. Now, therefore, I, Shane McFarland, Mayor of the City of Murfreesboro, on behalf of the entire City Council, do recognize October 20th, 2022 as Melinda Tate Day in the city of Murfreesboro as the creator and the leader of the Murfreesboro Half Marathon, and invite all of our citizens to join in this well-deserved recognition. And we couldn't let this go by without just giving her a proclamation. So, Melinda, you also will receive the key to the city. All right. A few other things. We have our consent agenda, but item 12 has been removed, and then item 14 is going to be moved and now be item 30 at the end of the agenda. All right. So, with the removal of 12 and 14, is there anything else that needs to be added or removed to the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Short, please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklett?
Aye.
Mr. Wade? Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move into old business. You have ordinance 22031 amending the zoning ordinance. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Miss Overwater,
Aye.
Miss Gels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Item 19, ordinance 220Z32 zoning property along Blackman Road and Veterans Parkway.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Miss Overwater,
Aye.
Miss Gels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, you have ordinance 220Z33 zoning property along Medical Center Parkway and West College Street. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Motion is second.
Miss Overwater,
Aye.
Miss Gels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move into ordinance. You have ordinance 22025, the apartment bifurcation policy. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Miss Overwater,
Aye.
Miss Gels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have ordinance 22030, termination of the Three Rivers Special Sanitary Sewer Assessment District. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Miss Overwater,
Aye.
Miss Gels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, you have ordinance 22030-38, amending the procurement code. Second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second.
Miss Overwater,
Aye.
Miss Gels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we have land use matters. We have ordinance 22OZ36, rezoning property along Haynes Drive. Ms. Green.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Our item tonight of new business and public hearing is for you to consider a rezoning request brought to the Planning Commission, and now the Planning Commission is forwarding a recommendation to you for property located along the south side of Haynes Drive. This property consists of two parcels that are just under 1.5 acres, and they're shaded green on the map that should be on your computer screen. These properties are currently zoned RS15, and that is single-family residential district, and it has a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. The properties to the north, east, south, and west, so all the surrounding properties, are also zoned RS15, that single-family residential district. The application for you to consider is to change the zoning from RS15 to PRD, Planned Residential District. In a PRD zoning, applicants are required to submit what we call a program book or a pattern book, providing the specifics of the development plan that they propose for this property. As such, you have in your packet a program book outlining the proposal for this property. It includes 8 single-family detached homes that will not own their individual lot, but will instead be similar to townhome where they own just the land underneath their building. Those 8 single-family detached homes will be on 1.45 acres. 4 of the houses are proposed to front along Haynes Drive, which is, as you know, a significant road in our community. And then 4 of the other 4 homes are pushed against the rear property line, with the parking concentrated in the middle of the development. The applicant will describe the proposed architecture for these homes in just a moment, but they have described it as a New Orleans-style architecture. The minimum lot size that would be required for each home is 2,100 square feet, and that's heated, so that means it excludes the garage. And the proposal is to provide 2 parking spaces with each home, and then a request for the council to consider 2 spaces in the garage as part of the required parking. In the zoning ordinance, all single-family detached homes are required to provide 4 parking spaces in the driveway, and then, of course, the garage would be in addition to any parking. But this plan proposes to count the 2 spaces in the garage and 2 spaces in the driveway as parking. They have provided 6 guest parking spaces along the sides of the property to compensate for the reduction in parking that they're requesting. The PRD also proposes a reduction in the minimum building setback lines for these properties. Minimum building setback lines are specific to the structures themselves, so excludes things as fences, walls, and hedges, or accessory structures. So typically in an RS-15 development, what you'll see is a 40-foot front setback, 12.5-foot side setbacks, and 30-foot rear setbacks. And I might just go ahead and pull up a concept plan so that you can have something to reference when we go through this project. So on this plan, you can see the 4 units that are close to Haynes, and then the 4 along the rear property line, the guest parking on each side property line. And with this plan, they are proposing a reduction in the minimum required setback lines. And so they are proposing to maintain 40 feet from the front property line. Haynes Drive is our major transportation plan to be improved and to be widened, to add lanes, sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. So we asked the engineer representing the applicant to look at the right-of-way along the frontage to ensure adequate right-of-way exists. If it doesn't, the applicant will be responsible for dedicating any necessary right-of-way to the city of Murfreesboro. But one of the reasons that was important to understand in the planning phase of this project is because it is a tight site, and we wanted to know if that front property line would move at all, because that 40-foot front setback will be measured from wherever the property line ends up being. So if they do need to dedicate right-of-way, the 40 feet would need to be measured from wherever that right-of-way needs to be dedicated. Their engineer has stated to us that they don't believe that any additional right-of-way is needed, but we know if that happened, structures might need to shift in the future, and we really wanted to have that information today. So they are maintaining the 40-foot front setback. However, they are proposing a reduction in the side setbacks. So where you would, with one single-family house, typically have a 12.5-foot side setback, they're proposing to have 8 feet as the side setback, and then reducing that 30-foot setback to 20 feet in the rear. So the sides and rear are closer than what you might normally see. With a planned development, if the council approves it, they are allowed to have those exceptions from the setback requirements. Additionally, an exception that would be required is the reduction in required parking. So the 4 parking spaces, which we talked about just a moment ago. And then another exception would be to increase the maximum gross density to 5.5 dwelling units per acre. Currently, the density that would be allowed here is less than 5.5, and so they'd like to have some additional units. This project went to the Planning Commission initially on June 1st, but that night it was deferred because the Planning Commission wanted to study the matter further and get some additional information. Some of the information that Planning Commission was considering were the exceptions being requested in the program book, but also one of the members asked for staff to go back to our fire rescue department and look at how our fire department would respond to this site. We know that our fire department probably does respond more to medical first responder calls than they do actual fire calls, and so if somebody here did need to call for help, we know our fire department will be there in a minute or a couple minutes. And so the Planning Commission wanted to understand how they would provide service to the site and asked us to see if there would be a way to get a fire truck to circulate the site. Mr. Roundtree will come up in just a moment. They have an auto turn simulation that they'll share with you that shows how that would be managed. When we brought it back to the Planning Commission, the plan needed to change somewhat to increase some of the drives. And so one of the areas that the Planning Commission discussed was the parking, the guest parking that actually is perpendicular to the adjacent property lines. One of the opportunities with the plan would be that when you pull into that space, the headlights would shine into the existing neighbors' yards. And so we wanted them to look at ways to mitigate that impact because we didn't want to, we wanted to see if there were opportunities to do that. With the change, however, though, they had to push the parking even closer to the property line, which eliminated the ability to have any landscaping there. And so the landscaping was removed and the parking was pushed a little bit closer. We shared that a fire truck cannot circulate the site without stopping and maybe turning or backing up a little bit, so it would not be a smooth movement. Initially, planning staff had asked the applicants to consider having 2 driveways, one on either side, and then grouping the units together if they wanted the smooth transition through the site, so the ability of a fire truck to navigate it. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of the plan as it's submitted to you, and that's what we're bringing before you today. to help with the loss of landscaping between the guest parking and the adjacent property. They're now proposing a 6-foot privacy fence. The formal open space did decrease in size just to be able to design the property so that the fire trucks could get on site. And then last, we like to discuss how this project would, how it compares to our future land use map. And when we review these projects, we like to compare them to both the existing future land use map and the proposed future land use map. And so both the existing and proposed future land use maps recommend suburban residential for this development, mostly because the existing character and fabric is established here. And so the future land use maps recommend zoning such as RS10, RS12, and RS15, and that 10, 12, and 15 speaks to the size, minimum size of the lot. So RS10 would be a 10,000 square foot lot, 12, 15. That's typical what you would see in a suburban residential lot. However, the future land use map does have an opportunity to allow for smaller lot sizes in exchange for greater open space, with the additional open space devoted to maintaining the suburban character and buffering adjacent properties and roads, as well as enhancing on-site amenities. So although there could be an opportunity to do small lots and still be consistent with our land use maps, this project isn't consistent with our land use maps because the density exceeds proposed densities, and there is not the additional open space that would help maintain the suburban style of the property. So when Planning Commission considered this application, they considered the exceptions requested in that program book, the comparison to our land use map in our comprehensive plan, and their recommendation to you was to approve the project as submitted. The applicants do have a presentation. I'd be glad to answer questions either before or after the presentation or public hearing tonight.
All right, thank you.
Did you say 1.3? 1.3 acres?
Mr. Roundtree.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thank you for the opportunity to present this project to you. I'm accompanied by Mr. Howard Wilson and Mr. Brian Burns as well, if there's any questions specifically for them regarding the development. I'd like to go ahead and walk through the PowerPoint if I could. Let's see where that thing's at. Let's see, Margaret Ann. Just want to start off by kind of showing you introductory graphics. As Margaret Ann mentioned, there's 4 single-family homes that are part of this lot of development, and we are hoping to create kind of a New Orleans style of character along the frontage along Haynes Drive. We realize that that's an important perception from Haynes Drive. It's a well-traveled road, and we wanted to make sure that our presentation along Haynes was attractive and would bring some quality and character that's unique to the roadway, but of a quality and character that's worthy of that location. The homes on the front, just for notice, they all have porches, either double porches or single porches. The homes in the rear are, they have front porches, but they also have back porches as well. All the homes have some open space. You'll see that within the developments themselves. There's patio areas and covered porches. But we did want to realize that the homes along the front, along Haynes Drive, would be all rear entry, and on the back lots, the back houses, they'd be all front entry. This is probably the best graphic to depict that. As Margaret Ann mentioned, it's RS15 around the property, and we are proposing for a PRD to be proposed on this particular site. The development character, it's really interesting in this location. There's subdivisions basically to the north, there's subdivisions to the south, there's subdivisions to the west. But once you get past Tender Boulevard, it kind of transitions. There's a really nice home on the corner that kind of anchors that intersection with Haynes and Tedder. However, once you get past that, there's basically large, deep lots that are much smaller homes. Some of the homes are in disrepair. So that was probably one of the catalysts that brought us to this site, that we saw there were some homes that were kind of needing some help, if nothing else, to really kind of change the character. We realized that part of the challenge we're working on tonight is that there's a little bit of an inconsistency that would be perceived how these homes would look in relationship to other homes along Haynes. But I would argue that the homes that are there now are really not great representations of where we want Murfreesboro to go. So a lot of those homes will be taken down. There's a beautiful yellow home that's adjacent to this property. That's a new development. It's just a really nice home. That owner is here tonight in the crowd. Was also at our neighborhood meeting, so he may have some things to say as well about this development. But I just want to kind of position us to realize that along that area of Haynes, it's a very eclectic's not the word, but it's definitely not what's happening towards the west, and it's definitely not what's happening more towards the east. It's just kind of a rare little hodgepodge of different types of homes at that location. Just some general pictures around. This shows you all know that site probably pretty well, but a lot of the pictures taken along Haynes. The bottom right picture basically talks about some of the residential character on the adjacent neighborhood behind, as well as that picture D in the center that shows some homes that are behind this particular piece of property. Right now, there's a pretty strong existing landscape buffer, just naturally. Obviously, if our development plans would allow it, we'd like to keep that intact to minimize any impact off-site from the adjacent neighbors. But really, it just goes about the residential character, and we all know how Haynes Drive kind of presents itself as well. As Margaret Ann mentioned, there are 8 homes on the development, but there's 4 different style of homes. They're identified as House 1, House 2, House 3, and House 4. I'll walk through each of those individual characters of those homes. Working with the staffs, one of the things that came up in terms of our revisions, the primary issue that originally came up was that the fire truck circulation was concerned, whether a fire truck can turn around. We met with Mr. P regarding this. Brian has. I've called Carl on several occasions related to this project. We feel like we've accomplished that goal of making sure fire trucks can move within the site. Another concern was over trash pickup as well, and it's a private hauler, so all the garages will have a poly card in them, and on garbage day they'll be picked up. But we did want to add some connectivity. There's no sidewalk currently along Haynes, but staff would like us to have some connectivity to Haynes Drive. So as the future, as Haynes gets developed and expanded, that there'd be a way to connect to it with our sidewalk system. Other than that, as I mentioned, the houses on the front facing Haynes are rear entry homes. The houses on the back are front entry homes, and the houses on the back would have their own private backyards. As Margaret Ann mentioned, there's 6 guest parking spaces, basically on the east side of the property, on the west side of the property, basically to divide that up. And in the center portion is our formal open space, and that would be a fire pit area, kind of a group gathering area, and that'd probably be a place that people would congregate and walk their dogs, what have you. So we feel like, from a development standpoint, we've met the criteria that was originally the concern. And as was mentioned, all the homes are minimum 2,100 square feet. They're all masonry homes. They have a New Orleans style, which is, I think, a little bit unique in the fact that I think they would have their own kind of sense of place. And because this area lacks that neighborhood feel, because it's along Haynes, one of the challenges with Haynes is that all those homes along Haynes kind of have their own individual feel, but they don't really sense that they're a part of a neighborhood. I feel like what we're proposing would definitely bring a sense of community for the people living within this development. As was mentioned, this would be home number 1. It has basically a double porch scenario. With the New Orleans style, what you get is all the doors are long and all the windows are accentuated, a real decorative rail, accentuated roof line. They'd have frieze boards with exposed rafter tails. This is a hip roof in this particular scenario. There's also a gable roof scenario. All the window trim, all the detailing of the windows, the gas lanterns, all that is really project a New Orleans style type of product. And as we mentioned, there's a covered porch on the back side of this particular home that's adjacent to the garage. So in addition to have a front porch, they'd also have a rear porch where they're sacrificing maybe yard area. They're going to have covered entertainment areas as part of this home. As I was talking to Brian earlier, the target market for these homes is really your empty nesters, people who are looking to downsize wherever they're coming from. We would consider these more of a higher end product. At the same time, we feel like there's a real target market that would really find these appealing. Folks that don't want yards, that really don't want any maintenance, but they still want to have a nice quality home in town. The next home has a New Orleans style flavor. This one has a lot of windows, a one-story front porch. It's got an eyebrow roof line that kind of gives architectural detail towards the upper portion of the house. It also has a decorative squirrel cage that makes it just have a nice little vibe up there on the top with a medallion type of look. All the shutters are operable, which is really key for the authenticity of the look of the project. And these all have accentuated lintel pieces above the windows and transom windows as well gas lights, decorative doors, accentuated columns, brackets along the columns. All this is designed really to accentuate the curb appeal along Haynes Drive. The rear homes are basically front-loaded, so the garage door has to be decorative. You'll get a glimpse of these from Haynes Drive, but primarily it'll be for the folks that are living in the development. Make sure that there's not a drop-off on the back in terms of quality and character of the buildings. So these also have operable shutters, full-length windows, hip roofs. All the products are masonry. It's primarily cementitious board, lap siding type of look that's consistent with kind of New Orleans style. Finally, this is another home on the rear, so there's two of each type. These will also front load, gas lantern. This has more of a stoop porch, but has a large back patio as well as a backyard. So as we mentioned, as you look at the floor plans, it's really designed for lower level living, for an empty nester type in the home. The bedrooms will be upstairs. From a landscape standpoint, we would like to add street trees along Haynes Drive. We'd like to add foundation planting along all the new homes along Haynes. Obviously, there's some required shade trees in all the parking areas. The formal open space would have shade trees as well. And then we have a perimeter. It's equivalent to a type A buffer along the perimeter of the property, all evergreens in that area. And as Margaret Ann mentioned, to avoid any kind of strobing effect to the adjacent properties, we have an opaque, solid 6-foot wall that's basically right at the end of the parking stalls. We can add low-level landscaping there. That wouldn't be a problem. But we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any negative impact from those cars facing the neighbor's property and creating a strobe effect. As far as the fire truck template, I'm going to run you through that real quick. That's on another page here. Let me see if I can get to it. Let's see where we are in the world. This is a fire truck simulation that we shared with Carl. Let's see. So I hope you can see it. I'll show it a few times so you can kind of see the movements of the vehicle.
You explain the red lines versus green lines?
I can. Except they're showing up as the green lines are the overall movement of the kind of the outer bounds of the movements. The red lines are more of the center line of the movement. The X's are wherever there is a kind of point of a turn. So wherever there's an X, that's where there's an adjustment being made as far as the movement of the vehicle. One thing we want to mention is that Carl said that more than likely the fire truck that would service this location is a 37-foot rig. We're showing the template with a 40-foot rig just to kind of compensate for any concerns or any overage on curbs or what have you. That 37-foot rig is not a guarantee. He says that is just the rig that would typically service this area, but obviously sometimes if a rig's closer, they'll send that one. But we wanted to make sure we had something that simulated kind of a worst-case scenario in that regard. Does that answer your question as far as green and red? Where we are on this project is that we've gone through multiple generations. The primary concerns initially were really about the fire truck, so we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that was resolved. It's really never really morphed into the product type at this point, but we do feel like one of our challenges in the development community is trying to understand that everything we present, and Shane and I had a talk this tonight, it's just we're running into more and more scenarios where it's harder and harder to have everything perfect, that everyone would be happy. But at the same time, we're trying to put the best product forward that meets really the expectations. And I'm happy to be presenting to you a project that is single-family homes, detached, of a higher end quality, all masonry, and that is where we're going. And also I'm excited because it's a quality builder who knows how to do these types of projects and has a great reputation within town and has a lot of track record to prove it. Cottages, General's Landing, General's Run. I mean, there's a long history with Mr. Burns in terms of how he pulls off things. And we also know there's a target market across Murfreesboro. There's all sorts of sectors that need a place, and we feel like these would really meet a need in terms of providing a type of home that we feel like is in need in this area as far as empty nesters having a place to go. It's that transition between Adams Place or one of those types of places, but it's still a place where they can downsize, have small yards, low maintenance, still live in a quality home within a neighborhood type of environment, which I think would be a little bit unique to Haynes Drive because, like I said, most of those homes feel like they're individual homes just kind of along a stretch. this would have a little bit more of a neighborhood appeal, in our opinion. So with that in mind, I'm available for any questions you may have. Our neighborhood meeting, as Margaret had mentioned, was months ago. We had it at a firehouse, which was kind of neat. It wasn't well attended, but there were quite a few people there, maybe 10 or 12. I've had one that was like 70 or 80 of late, so that's a well-attended one. But the folks that came were adjacent property owners, and at that point, there was no opposition to what we were proposing from the adjacent property owners. So with that in mind, I'm available for any questions, as is Mr. Burns and Mr. Wilson.
Council members? I've got just a couple. Do you think, and I'm not being facetious about this, but do you think maybe the adjacent property owners are not opposed to this because they're looking at what the council does, because they may want to do the same thing to their properties? The houses that you had referred to were not really what Murfreesboro is headed towards. Have y'all had any contact with adjacent property owners that may want to do this?
The one on the west, Brian's spoken to directly. I would just, if I could weigh on that, we've gotten no wind that this would be kind of starting a trend in that direction, especially because the yellow home that's already there is a new
Sure,
construction. It's a
yeah.
beautiful home.
Brian Burns, Blue Sky. We've tried to buy the property right beside it also. The gentleman to the right of the property, if you're looking at it, and he wanted to sell. The problem was he couldn't find a house to replace what he had. So, and we told him, it was like, if we get it now, we have a better chance of including it and making it a nicer, bigger project. But
Yeah.
his project, by itself, is just not big enough to do anything on.
How big is his?
I want to say it's about 90 foot, 100 foot wide, but.
Yeah, okay.
And the gentleman here owns the yellow house to the left of it, and I don't think he has any intentions. I mean, everybody changes their mind someday, but I think this project, and I know a lot of people's called me on it, for 8 houses, I'm used to getting calls when it's like 600 townhomes at General's Landing, but this is 8 homes, and we're not really trying to reinvent anything. We're just trying to make another nice project that looks appealing and looks nice. And I know there's a lot of people, or not a lot of people, some people have brought up that, they don't want other spots or property in Haynes Drive to do that. I hope other spots in Haynes Drive does do it. I think these kind of projects are important to Murfreesboro. I think if you want to eliminate the urban sprawl of always having to expand your borders of Murfreesboro, you use the land wisely that you have in town. And I don't want it to turn into Nashville. I have friends that build in Nashville, and if this property was in Nashville, they would probably try to put 40 units on it somehow. And I think there's a happy medium between, trying to be Nashville and letting us be Murfreesboro and do what we do here in Murfreesboro. We've invested in Murfreesboro for a while now, downtown and sprawling, and Murfreesboro is pretty much the only place we build. We got one project in Laverne, but Murfreesboro is what we invest in. That's where we both live. We try to build nice projects that look nice and make you guys look good, so you don't have to explain yourself 5 years from now. So I'm here. If you guys got questions, I'll be glad to answer anything you guys have.
Margaret, and these are the questions I have, or Ms. Green. Typically, what do we require for guest parking and parking? That's the big difference.
Sure, it varies from the type of development. With single-family detached homes, our preference is that garages can be utilized however residents want to use them, and that there not have to be any recorded restrictions so that there has to be parking in there, because the planning department doesn't want to get in the business of inspecting people's garages to see if they comply with those standards. So if you have 4 parking spaces per each home, we find that that's generally acceptable. We get into scenarios where guest parking is added, usually with townhomes or other type developments. It's not something usually in single-family lots that have those 4 driveways where they meet it. So we try to get them to use the 4 spaces per unit as a goal, since we think it works pretty well. And then also making sure they're accessible, of course, located in a place that people will easily walk.
Council members?
the fire and the first responder, has that been answered adequately in terms of having enough turnaround space in there?
So the planning department, we also have engineers in the planning department who review development plans. And so we don't believe that a fire truck is able to circulate the site. So if your wish is for a fire truck to circulate the site without conflict, the site doesn't not accommodate that. However, if there is a plan where you can provide all services from Haynes Drive, pull off the road, then that's a different question. But we don't believe the site is adequately designed with cars parked in the guest parking, cars parked in the driveway, that a fire truck could circulate it. Certainly, it could be various sizes of truck, but as far as I understand how we serve properties is whoever's closest responds. Used to, we would say, well, this would be Fire Station 2 that has this size trucks, but now it's whoever may be closest. It's a different model, which I don't completely understand, but I know that you all as council understand more, so.
The planning, I guess, in June, there was 5 or 6 questions that came up. One of them was fire. And then the other 4 or 5, I guess, was around rental units, selling to a rental corporation, things like that. At the August meeting, it seemed like the only thing going off the notes and what was sent to us in our packet, the fire was addressed, I guess, by the Planning Commission. But the other 5 or 6 questions, I guess, around trees and things like that was not. Can you shed a little more light on that?
Sure. So when we advise Planning Commission as staff, we bring to their attention items that we think have an opportunity to be addressed. And Planning Commission may think, well, that's not really something that we think is that important, or it is. And so we, of course, with the first review, brought that we thought the density and the setbacks were an opportunity that we thought should be addressed. Planning Commission, when they considered it at night of the public hearing, didn't flag those as concerns. And so planning staff, of course, defers to the judgment of Planning Commission. But Planning Commission did ask us to specifically look at the ability of a truck to circulate the site, and that was the task. And so we sent a recommendation to the design team and asked them to lose 1 or 2 units and then design the site so a fire truck could circulate, and gave them a path to do that. And they really didn't want to lose the units, and said that they wanted to go to Planning Commission with the plan that they had prepared, which certainly applicants can do. As staff, we're just making recommendations. And so with the changes, though, that they made, it changed the site again. And so we wanted to bring to Planning Commission attention those opportunities, just so you know these are the things that changed based on getting the fire truck onto the site. Even though it can't circulate smoothly, it can get onto the site. And so those were the fact that the formal open space was reduced, the parking is closer to the property lines, the lack of landscaping, and of course another item that was brought up was that the applicants discussed the opportunity to place restrictions on rentals for these properties. And so I heard that as a conversation, as a request from a particular Planning Commission member or so, but I don't see any way that it is being implemented. I think that they had an intention to do it. I think the developer's representative said he was more in favor of properties' rights and really didn't want to add more restrictions to properties, but understanding that he heard a Planning Commission City Council member bring it up. So we just bring them to their attention, and Planning Commission may flag them as opportunities or not.
Okay.
Let me ask for clarification. So in this particular project, our team, the city team, we are saying that we don't have adequate space for a truck to turn around?
I'll get you guys, if y'all want to have a seat. I'll make sure after Ms. Green's done, you can come up.
So viewing this auto turn simulation, you can see where the truck pulls into the site, has to stop, turn the wheels, stop, turn the wheels to actually get to the site. So it's not a smooth movement. A truck can't pull into the site, in an emergency and just freely circulate the site as it's designed. And so with, our engineers, they looked at the simulation and they looked at the data, and it says, like, if a car is parked there, the parking spaces are 19 feet deep, which is an average parking stall. Some parking cars stick out a little bit further, some are shorter. We believe that there are opportunities in the design where that could not be a smooth movement. So if that's what you want, we don't believe this design accommodates it.
So what-
However, if it's okay to be served from Haynes Drive.
So
then-
what happens if one of our large, because typically when we have a fire, like we had one in our neighborhood, and there were three stations that responded. I mean, there were, I think we call them brigades, but there were 6 apparatus, and 2 of them were the really big pumper trucks. Or how long? I don't think I've ever asked. How long are those big pumper trucks? They're longer than 40 feet, aren't they?
I believe they are. I can't tell you specifically how long they are, but I bet somebody can. I will tell you, the fire department, if they're concerned about it, and they've told me this, not being able to navigate it, they won't even take it on the site. And so, I don't know. I mean, there will be multiple stations. There'll be at least 2 stations that respond, maybe more than 2 stations, and we don't know what they'll be driving. But we do know we've got some bigger trucks in our community because we've got some tall buildings. And so, I mean, I don't think that they'll drive into the site. So say one of the back 4 units is who needs to be responded to. I think that they'll probably just pull into the grass on Haynes at this point.
On your design here, that, what size is the truck, or is it a particular size on your graph here?
They designed it a 40-foot long truck, I believe Clyde said.
Can you roll that one more time?
Yeah, make it drive, sure.
Yes. This is a 40-foot, right? Are we considering that a smaller one?
I think it's typical.
Okay.
And so some of these lines, and I think Clyde explained them, some of them are the wheels of the vehicle, which don't reflect the actual body of the truck that extends beyond the wheel. It's my understanding that some of these paths show wheel paths, and so the truck may or may not extend beyond that wheel. And so, of course, when it turns, it would be a different maneuver.
So we've got a 37-foot truck. This is a 40-foot analysis. But there's no guarantee, and I don't know how large our trucks are.
Chief just texted back and said 43 feet
43 feet.
is what our long pumper truck is.
So it looks okay as long as that 43 doesn't go in there.
So I guess if there's a fire, we can make a note, don't send this truck.
Notes.
Trucks 1, 2, and 3 do not respond.
Okay.
So you're saying staff, you're basically saying you don't believe that a fire truck can get in there adequately? Planning Commission
Looking at
said-
this simulation tells us that it doesn't work.
But planning said it does.
Well, I think the planning department was comfortable with the idea, and when I talked to Mr. Pease, he said he wanted the fire truck to circulate the site, but I heard from the applicant that he told him something different, and so if, I don't try not to, whatever he says I defer to, but I think he's at a conference right now, so I don't want to put words in his mouth.
If I may, not that our staff isn't perfectly capable of being not biased, but I was very curious about this fire truck issue myself. It's what I brought up at Planning Commission. So I sought outside counsel and asked for some advice. And someone not associated with the city said that it's common for the fire trucks not to do a full loop and maybe just pull in and use their hoses appropriately. So after having a discussion with him back and forth, I did feel better about the fire truck issue. I do know it's a tight squeeze, though. And as the developer knows, and as you know, my issue is always with the parking. But I feel better about the fire truck. So I know that I previously had a problem at Planning Commission, for the record.
I think that goes to, I hope what I was trying to say is that we're saying a truck can't circulate the site. It may be able to serve it a different way, but it
Yeah.
cannot circulate the site smoothly, and not when people are living there.
Right. In my non-firefighter mind,
Yeah.
I was like, what if people's houses burn down, you know? I feel a little better.
Would the second truck just sit out on Haynes? If 2 trucks are getting called out and 1 truck can barely fit around, where's the second truck going?
We'll have the public hearing here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The,
Hey, the last question I have, and Sam, this may be a question for you. How wide is the right-of-way that we typically will need for, I mean, it's only a matter of time. We voted, I don't know how long ago, when we widened DeJarnette Lane, we voted to widen Haynes Drive, and then we stopped and didn't widen Haynes Drive. But how much right-of-way do we need? Across from this site is Jamison Place, and there's a big ditch right across from this site where there's there's a big stormwater,
I think there's a wall too.
yeah, that's there.
Brick wall.
I think.
What's that?
There's a brick wall
Yeah, so what,
to
yeah.
Jamison Place.
So I know we can't go that direction, I wouldn't think. So the reason when you look at Haynes Drive now, all those homes that are sitting really far off with telephone poles 35 feet in their yard, that's where the right-of-way is. So how much right-of-way would we need around where this sort of little S-curve is right there?
I'm not sure what's there existing. I will say we really, we would like to see this section of Haynes Drive as I guess as a pedestrian-friendly, which basically means sidewalks and multi-use trail. Typically for that, we'll need about 65 feet. Of course, anytime you get around curves, you always be wary to the inside of the curve because that's where we're typically going to widen to kind of flatten that out. So an average number is 65 feet, and then maybe a little bit more towards the inside of the curves. I will say, a few years ago we did, as part of the hotspot project that the council approved, we went in and did several intersections along the way. Some of the major intersections, and we didn't need a lot of right-of-way at those locations. Now, that includes sidewalks or multi-use trail, but we were able to, kind of squeeze that third lane in at a lot of our, intersections of need.
So if there's a 40-foot setback on this property, do you think we'll have to get into that 40-foot setback?
I would think so, to some degree, yes.
Okay. All right.
What was it, I guess for are y'all planning city garbage pickup or boutique style? Can you explain a little bit more on that?
All of our projects, we've done away with dumpsters completely.
Okay.
I don't like them. I think they're a nuisance. I think neighbors hate them. So we're using valet trash services on this project. There'll be a garbage truck comes in, picks the trash up just like they do over on Villas on Vine right now. In any of our projects, we use valet trash service where the city cannot do it. They're small trucks. They get around pretty easy.
Okay. The other question is, you have no intention of selling these to a rental corporation?
No, Mr. Wilson here, we were just talking, we don't mind putting restrictions that these will not be sold for rental.
So you would put that in the covenants?
We'll put that in the covenant.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And also on the fire truck, I went and met with Carl Pease on the fire truck. I sat in Carl's office because I did not understand it. I have built a lot of small projects like a Villas on Vine where you got one road in, you turn, you got driveways. There's no circle for a fire truck to turn around. And Carl made it very clear that a fire truck does not have to turn around. He says you can't, if you're putting a fire out, you're not parking right beside the fire. You park about 100 to 150 foot away. He says one truck would go this way, one truck would go this way, which would keep them their distance away they need to be. I think the whole fire truck thing's got way blown out of proportion. We weren't going to build something without Carl's blessing. I went and sat in his office with him, and he showed me how the fire truck simulation works, because I didn't know. I didn't know I had no idea what that stuff meant. And he's the one that explained to me and showed me. The original plan we had before we changed it worked with Carl. I sat in Carl's office, he showed me how it worked, and we left. And then it got brought up by staff that they didn't think it would work. So that's why we took some of the open space out and we widened it more to make it even work better.
Do you know what that radius is? Clyde, do you know what that turning radius is?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right, let's open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak for or against, if you'll come to the podium, if you'll state your name and address, you'll have 3 minutes as an individual, 5 minutes if you're representing a group. If you'll keep all of your comments directed to the council, we'll get those answered at the end of the public hearing. All right, we'll open the public hearing.
Good evening, council members. My name is Brett Garner. I'm the resident at 903 Haynes Drive, which is the property directly to the east of these two parcels. I have lived on this property for 24 years. It's been in my family since 1947. So I have a special attachment. Regardless of what gets built next door to me, I am not moving anywhere. That is not my intention. My home has several deed restrictions and have had 2 variances for it. One for an accessory apartment, which my grandmother occupied for 6 years, and just recently, and actually Margaret Ann helped me that when she first got hired in the planning department. So now we've got a variance for that same apartment so my mom and dad can move in because it exceeds the accessory apartment square footage. I'm not allowed to rent that apartment. If I ever do sell my home, I have to close up the exterior entrance and remove a dryer or range in order to keep it compliant with the way that things are by code. As far as traffic goes, I can tell you there are mornings when I can easily get out of my driveway. There are other mornings I will sit for 20 minutes at the end of my driveway waiting to get out. And that's any time between 7 and about 8. In the evening, from about 4 until sometimes 6, same scenario. Sometimes it's easy to get out, sometimes it's not. When it comes to emergency vehicles, I've had 3 fire calls respond to my home. Obviously, I don't have a roadway for a fire truck to pull on, but when they do stop, it blocks all of Haynes Drive. There is no access around. So if that's an issue, I don't see any way to fix that other than make that road wider inside the development. What's best, the best use of this property? I can't answer that question for you. I have been to, this is the 6th planning meeting for those parcels since I have resided at Haynes Drive. There have been talks from 3 single-family dwellings up to 20 townhomes. So I really can't tell you what the best option is. This is definitely a better option than 20 townhouses. I do like the development that the mayor's construction company did on Sulphur Springs. I don't know how similar those lot sizes are as far as the original parcels, but I've walked those properties. It's a beautiful home, and I think size-wise, it's pretty similar to what the developer's planning to build on these 2 parcels if accepted. My home's almost 5,000 square feet, and that's not a normal home for a lot of people to have. So I would not expect to see the exact same thing built next door to me. As to the neighborhood feel that Clyde mentioned earlier, most of those residents, we've been neighbors multiple decades together. We do have a neighborhood feel, but that, of course, is changing as people die off and move away. Like I said, I'm not going anywhere, regardless of what is built next door to me. So you're going to have to make the best judgment call as to the use of this property.
Thank you. All right. Nice guy. Yeah. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider on first reading ordinance 22 OZ 33, and I think council still had some more questions. I didn't want to cut anyone off, but
Yeah, this has already been talked about, but I'll bring it up again. The field down Haynes Drive, if we approve this, then that could be the catalyst to change others, but also think about other neighborhoods. Mitchell Nelson neighborhood going down Jones and Clark, all these other RS-15 neighborhoods could slowly transition to this really dense, not flow at all. I drive by this property multiple times every single day. It just doesn't sit with the rest of the neighborhood.
How many, I'm sorry, you finished?
I'm done, go ahead.
I'm sorry. How many units are we talking about total?
8.
Is there any consideration to lessen those units?
That was a question I had, but you asked it.
yeah.
I read your mind, you're saying.
You read my mind, Madeline.
Or she's smarter than you, Austin.
She's smarter than me.
Well, I think what may would be the thing if it is something the council wants to ask to lessen the units, then it would be something we need to defer to have them come back. I hate to
Okay.
make them negotiate as we're sitting here, but that would typically what we would try to do.
Well, then I make a motion that we table this.
Well, I got a couple things. Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Kurt.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got just a list of stuff that I wrote down, and I've struggled with this because I respect Mr. Burns. I think he does a good job with the projects that he does. The project that you're referring to on Sulphur Springs, that's almost 4 acres with 3 houses is what the total is. It's about 1.3 acres per house. I say that because I would not driving by this property as much as I drive by this property. I've lived on Tomahawk Trace, I've lived in Breckenridge, and now I run by this property. I would never have thought that I would bring, on 4 acres, bring 20 units on there. I just wouldn't consider that. And I think that's where I'm struggling with this. I do think it's a great development. I think the character is good. I disagree with empty nesters going to live there because empty nesters typically don't want to move where you have master up, or at least not any empty nesters that I know. They want to have their bedroom down. And I think there is one plan that has a bedroom down. 2 plans, one plan in 2 different spots. But the problem I have is from Memorial all the way back to Regionwood Drive or Regency Park Drive, you've got these large lots. And then you drive down Sulphur Springs and you've got these large lots. You drive down Hamilton Drive, you drive down Jones Boulevard, you drive down Minerva, you drive down all these areas in our community where you have these larger lots, and they're typically ranch style houses that were on these lots. We're going to tell as a council, if we approve this, that it is okay in those subdivisions to take, if you've got a 1.5 acre lot, which this is 1.4 acres, we're going to tell them it's okay to stack houses front and back. And so that's the part I'm struggling with, because if you go into Mitchell Nielsen and you look at redevelopment, I would argue Mitchell Nielsen has or had some homes that were needing repaired, and you're starting to see in Mitchell Nelson, Haynes Drive, Tomahawk, Indian Springs, people are buying those houses and bringing them up. So like this project, I would think 1.4 acres, have 3 houses that set off the road. That makes sense. Because Haynes Drive, if you look at those houses, most of the houses set off of that front setback. They're not 40 feet. And so that's my problem I'm having with this is we're going to open up Pandora's box in these areas where it's typically been RS-15 subdivisions. That's why the lots, like you were talking about the neighbor to the west, that's why it's a 90-foot lot, but it's probably 250 foot deep. That's why they were designed that way, because that's the way they were designed. And now we're changing all of that. And I would also say if it does pass, you need to let the residents who buy those 4 homes that front Haynes Drive, and let them know they're not going to get a 40-foot yard. That yard is going to be a lot less once that road's driven. And that's the other thing I go back to. Name me one house in that area that does not have a backyard. One. There's not one. And we're getting ready to add 4 that don't have backyards. And I'm telling you, as a runner, if you want to run down Haynes Drive or ride a bike down Haynes Drive, you are taking your life when you run down that street. And we're now putting 8 homes on 1.4 acres that the open space area is probably 40 by 60. So 2,000 square feet, and we're going to tell them, hey, that's where you can walk your dog, because there ain't nowhere else on Haynes Drive that you're going to be able to walk a dog or walk to have amenity access. It's not there. That's why I'm struggling with it. I think it's a great project, just not here. It needs to be downtown or somewhere else that we're really pushing for that redevelopment. And I would tell you that if I've lived in the area a long time, and if you were to go to Jameson Place and show them this, or you were to walk around the neighborhood, they're not here, I would tell you the majority of people in that neighborhood would say this is not what would be acceptable in the neighborhood.
And they showed up at the planning commission meeting.
So,
If it were to go from 8 to 6 or 8 to 4, is that more acceptable? Because, I'm looking at it, right now it's 5.5, and if you went to 6, it's 4.1.
I mean, it's not my decision. Did we talk about that at planning, Margaret Ann? I feel like we did. Did we bring that up? Okay.
Staff recommended that the density be reduced, but the applicants wanted to advance the application with 8 units.
I didn't ask this, but is staff, I think I'm reading between the lines, but is staff opposed to this?
In its current condition, we think that there are opportunities that created that at this time, staff doesn't support it, it's on its own. Of course, we want to present to you Planning Commission's
Sure.
recommendation, but at this stage, it's not something that we've supported.
Okay.
This is a very political answer.
I'm watching you, Jamie, learning
Good answer, Mark.
business over water.
So let me ask you this. So if the developer would take off 1 unit, would the developer be willing to do that? You got 4 on the front and you got 4 on the back, and if you take 1 and have 3 lined in the back?
Well, we just assumed this was going to be a negotiation, so we came here to negotiate, I guess, so.
What if you did 4 that are offset and just did
I don't
4?
think 4 or 4 garages looks good. I think this project, the way it is, with the 4 in the front, hides the 4 in the back with a courtyard in the middle. It looks awesome this way. We designed it this way, and the reason we didn't want to negotiate with the circle drive and stuff is we wanted this look. If planning is, if you guys are saying, hey, you need to take 1 off, yes, we'll take 1 off. That's what we got to do. But then it leaves an oddball number. So we would probably take 1 off the rear and have the bigger yards. But there is a lot of people who buy houses who do not want yards anymore. A majority of the people who buy things from me do not want a yard anymore.
Would you agree that on the west side of town and south side of town and lots of areas driving down Memorial Boulevard, there's lots of opportunities where people could go buy that don't have those want yards?
Yeah, there's also one on Haynes Drive called Shawnee. And that was done in 1989, and I'm sure the council then had to decide if, hey, this is going to open up Pandora's box, because this has got 6,000 and 8,000 square foot lots over there, I think. I mean, and that neighborhood's a beautiful neighborhood. I had nothing to do with it. I was still in college in 1989. But there's nothing wrong with that neighborhood.
How long had you been in college? I'm just kidding, bro.
8 years.
I should have been a doctor.
So would you be willing to take 1 unit off?
We would be willing to take 1 off if that's what the council likes, but we'd rather not, because I think what we got's a great design.
Would you be willing to take 2 off?
Well, now we're getting into real negotiations. If that's what the council thinks is best, but I really think what we got looks the best. And there has to be a point where we say we got to try to keep stuff semi-affordable. I know affordable is just out the door. I mean, nobody uses the word affordable anymore, but we got to have something that people can still afford with interest rates that's high.
What's the price on these?
These are probably going to be in the high 5s, low 6s, which is affordable by Murfreesboro standards now, which is almost super cheap by Nashville standards. So I know doesn't sound affordable. I'd like to keep it, but I think what we got looks the best. I'm up for what you guys think. At the end of the day, it's whatever you guys think anyway. So I guess that's what we're here to. But I think if you look at our projects we've done in the past, we've never brought a project in front of you guys that I think you have a problem with, ever. And when this project will not be a problem either. I think it's just got more, it's one of these projects with just 8 houses. Like I said, I'm used to being protested with 600 homes, having T-shirts and everything else made. But for 8, I was just surprised that it brought up this much attention. I thought this was a no-brainer. Because I knew they didn't want townhomes here. I knew they don't want apartments and rentals there. So we thought really nice looking single family homes.
What would be the max you all would consider number?
I guess that's where the negotiating starts. I don't know if we have a number. We would love to keep it the way it is, unless you guys are just telling me now you don't like it the way it is. Then I guess that's where we come down to, deleting one or two if that's what you guys decide you want us to do. Like I say, what we got now flows really well. The fire is no problem, the garbage is no problem, and I don't think the sales will be a problem. And there's something similar to it on the road in Shawnee. I know it's an old neighborhood, it's been there a while, but that's a gorgeous neighborhood too. We're just a smaller version of it.
I mean, you build beautiful stuff, and I should have been a doctor too. That's a joke. But I'm sitting here, all I would say is if you did reduce it one or two, especially if it was on the front side, then you gain multiple entrances, which kind of takes this whole equation of getting emergency vehicles in and out. It creates multiple access points, but that's my 2 cents worth. I think you build beautiful stuff, great stuff, quality stuff. I think you're willing to do the right thing in terms of, the rental piece that we've kind of talked about. It's the density and the location there on Haynes, which I think some people have an issue with.
And even density, I think we're only 5 units an acre, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, 5.71
5.71.
at 1.4 acres.
Okay.
The tough thing with
This is not a super dense project. This isn't like one of the projects, years past where you'd have 10 or 12 units an acre. This is below the sewer.
The tough thing I struggle with, man, is it's dense for the area. I mean, there's not.
So was Shawnee when it was put in.
Right, but Shawnee, if you compare to this, you drive through like a gated community, you drive over a creek with a bridge, and you can't even see Shawnee from the road. This sits on the road. I mean, you can't see Shawnee from Haynes Drive.
No, that's true.
So it's just not,
It's pretty much like Tuscany to me.
Yeah, it's
Tuscany
just
is extremely dense, but it's a beautiful neighborhood. Once again, it had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And he did a great job with that neighborhood. It's the same size driveways.
I mean, I drove it today, and I see exactly what you're saying about the 2 older houses, or the older house in the lot. And it's, to the gentleman that lives there at 903, it's like, what are you going to do in this area? It is tight in that section of the road, and that will have to be widened at some point. So I agree with your point about houses, 1, 2, 3, and 4 there on the front. They need to realize at some point in time they won't have a yard.
Yeah, I mean, that's when we do vote at some point to widen Haynes Drive, and I think it's the last time we did a traffic count, I think it was 13,000 cars a day drive, and that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago. The 4 people who are going to live there are going to be sitting here at this council meeting speaking against widening Haynes Drive, because we're going to be taking their front yards.
That's part of what we got to tell them is, as honest builders, this is where your property line is really going to be one day. And that's why we designed it for the future expansion.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Thank you.
All right. We've got the public hearing's closed.
If the council's okay, I'd like to make the motion that the developer take 1 unit off, whether it's front, back, side, I don't really care. For access to emergency vehicle. I'd like to see it probably in the back side. Instead of having 4 units in the back, have 3 units in the back and split those units up. I would give it more access to a emergency vehicle trying to get in.
In the back?
3 units in the back, you'd have to take them off the front to get the access.
I mean, it doesn't matter where he takes it off.
Yeah.
I don't care where he takes it off.
But you can't get-
That's my preference, because you're gonna have a turning radius right here. If you look how it turns in here, it's very tight once it turns in to the left corner over here. So you could take it off there and spread the units out. It doesn't really matter. What I'm asking is that the developer remove 1 unit from the total, go from 8 units to 7.
Are you saying double access roads now then?
No, I'm not saying double access road. Yep, I'm saying keep the entrance just as it is.
Yeah, I would say remove 1 in the front That gives
It
you.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think that would be between the developer and staff.
Yeah, that's up to them, but it gives you multiple access points.
Yeah, so,
Personally, I would rather see 2, because then your density's around 4.1 per acre.
well, just like the developer says, he has to make money, he has to do what's right, and
I
our job is
understand.
really to see what's in the best interest of
Yeah.
Murfreesboro. And just like Brian said, you know what, he has built a good product.
He
and
builds a
showed-
great product.
He's shown us that he's done what he's gonna say he's gonna do. But I'm willing to say, hey, take a unit off, go from 7 units, from 8 units to 7. That's my motion.
I mean, I like that in theory. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not confident it's going to help the emergency services,
Mr. Burns,
you know.
sorry, Jamie.
If council wants us to take a unit off the rear, we can take it off, move the units closer, and spread out the turning radius. We'd rather take it off the rear so we can keep the front landscape with that New Orleans look, have the shutters and have the gas lights, have the look. It doesn't, money-wise, make any difference to us. I think it just looks symmetrical with the 4 in the front and 3 in the rear. But
That one.
if that's what you guys like, we have no problem with that.
All right, we have a motion.
I'm not sure, I don't see in my head, maybe I'm just not visualizing it, but how taking one unit off the back helps you any with the turn radius. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
He just explained it.
Well, where do you get that? You still have that single access, right? That's what you're saying.
I'm not saying that they need a second entrance bill. I'm just saying I like the entrance as is. I think Jamie stated that she had talked to someone that most emergency vehicles don't drive all the way into any property anyway.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I'm trying to be the negotiator in between to say, can we not get the developer to take a unit off? He can take it off the front if he wants, he can take it off the back. It really doesn't matter. I'm just saying, what would help this project to move along?
Our engineer here seems to think that if we want to lose one off the front, we can widen the entrance and widen the whole road as you turn in, so we can lose one off the front too.
So one off the front and one off the back?
Well, one off the front or the back.
Oh.
I heard both.
There's a difference in or and.
Yeah, there's one letter.
6 years of college taught me that.
Well, I think respectfully, Mr. Wade, I don't know how removing one solves any of the staff issues.
I agree with Ms. Aberwater. I think if you removed, me personally, and I'm not an engineer, but if you remove 2, preferably on the front, you gain multiple access points. Who's not to say you orient that house the other way and they still have more of a yard whenever that road is wide?
Mr. Roundtree.
Here comes the engineer.
I'm as much an architect as I'm an engineer, so I'm really concerned about the aesthetics, and I think I've heard the concerns aesthetically. And I drove it today too to kind of study the development pattern. And that's where I saw, is there room for any kind of variation along Haynes? I also always look and say, what if we put the exact same thing back that's there? That's not happening anywhere. So there is obviously a compromise. I think if we can, we did do some generations where we had the 3 on the front. We create more of a spatial feel that's consistent with Haynes. I don't think we necessarily can go to a ranch style where you have the long linear. I don't think those are really happening too much anymore, but I think we can give that gap that's making it feel, the density you're feeling is along Haynes. Brian's been super successful at having double-loaded developments where the houses in the back are super nice, but you just don't really see them, so they don't really kind of have that feel of density around them. As far as the fire truck template, if we justify that driveway one way or the other, we can make it work, and we will make it work. I just want to let you know from Huddleston Steel's standpoint, all we can do is meet with the fire chief and do a fire truck template. And if the fire chief says he's fine, that's the best we can do. And so that's been a little challenge because it's been hard for everyone to kind of interpret that particular template itself. But we would love to have the opportunity to come back with a proposal for 3 on the front, potentially changing the justification of the driveway. We feel like if we had 2 entrances, we're not really gaining because it's going to keep those houses tight. And I think that's what you're feeling as far as the perception. So whether we justify it one way or the other, if we have two, if we have three on the front, we have a lot of room to move. And we'll use every bit of that square footage that we're saving on the front to create separation between the units to kind of take away that feeling of density.
So we have a motion to remove one. Is there a second for that motion? All right.
I'm not sure I understand the procedure. Is it more appropriate to defer or just?
Well, yeah, so Kurt, either your motion failed for lack of a second. So we can either defer, but we can defer it, but I think the council needs to make the decision, are we one unit, are we two units, or are we, because I hate for them to come back and spend money to work on a plan saying that we're just going to eliminate one when I hear Austin say
Two.
it needs to be two. So I think that needs to be something. And if the applicant doesn't want to agree to losing two, then the next option is for us to go ahead and vote this.
I'll make a motion that we move forward with it if the developer will reduce it by 2 units.
All right, we have a motion. Well, we need to ask the developer that. I've not done this before, but
It's a poker game.
it's first time for everything.
If this will make council happy, we'll reduce it to 6 units. We would like to reduce it where we got 2 units in the front with 1 entrance still. I don't want to do, for 6 houses, we do not need 2 entrances. If you do that, then every single townhome project in town is not going to work. But I'd like to have 1 entrance, and we'll widen the roads coming in, we'll widen the curves. If you take those 2 houses out on the corners, you got all sorts of, you could put whatever size fire truck you wanted down through there then. So I don't think we'll have a problem. If that makes council happy, we'll be glad to reduce it to 6 units. But we'd like to keep it for aesthetic reasons, we'd like to keep it to the 1 entrance. If that's.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to reduce to 6 units and have, Mr. Tyndall or Mr. Ives, with this, we're not approving the project, so is there really a reason to?
I would say that given the discussion, it would appear to me that the appropriate motion would be to defer.
Okay.
I agree.
It sounds as though the applicant has heard the discussion.
Yes.
And if he comes back with something other than 6, he may not get a positive response.
Then I'll
And the
withdraw.
layout's changing, so I think we want to see the layout again.
Right.
Then I'll withdraw my
Look at
motion.
the plan.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Would you like to
Withdraw
make
the
a-
second and make the motion to defer?
Second.
Motion and a second for a motion to defer. Ms. Short, please call the roll.
Ms. Overwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade? Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye.
Change, yeah, it really does.
All right. We'll now move to Town Creek Phase 2 Track 3 acquisition.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland, members of council. We're here today to ask about the acquisition of Track 3, which is 117 Northwest Broad for Town Creek Phase 2. Our city appraisers found the property to be valued at $250,000. The seller proposed an administrative settlement that included a 10% increase, which is allowable in our federal and state procurement or land acquisition process. So we recommend that we accept that and acquire this property for Town Creek Phase 2, including an estimated $3,500 for closing cost. This will be paid for out of the general fund based on previously approved budget for Town Creek Phase 2. Be glad to answer any questions.
Which tract is this?
Track 3, it's the subway.
Oh, the subway.
Yes, Subway's been closed out of business there for about 2 years.
Any questions?
No questions.
If there are none, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Short, please call the roll.
Ms. Overwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade? Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, fiscal year 22 CIP funds reallocated for McKnight Park Access Road. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor. We have for you tonight to reallocate FY '22 CIP funds for the construction of a McKnight Park Access Road. Staff requests that the reallocation of CIP funds for the design and construction of an access road that will provide a connection between McKnight Park and the adjoining properties to the west. The design will extend the current access road behind some of the restaurants there, approximately 200 feet to the north and 100 feet to the east, making connection with McKnight Park. We've included a map showing the proposed access road and extension for your review. I might add, we may actually either move that connection or add possibly another one just to improve the circulation. The estimated cost of the access road is $700,000. That includes construction, any necessary property acquisition, and also the design, and that will be reallocated from the FY '22 bond premium. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Griffith?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater,
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we have Old Fort Parkway, Franklin Road. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. State Route 96 resurfacing contract with TDOT. Mr. Kerr.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. TDOT plans to resurface State Route 96 between the I-24 interchange and Carroll Drive in the spring of next year. Staff is working with TDOT to combine efforts and expand the project to include additional improvements, including converting the existing five-lane roadway cross-section to a 7-lane roadway cross-section. The plan would convert the existing shoulders to a through lane in both directions while still maintaining the middle turn lane. In the past, the city and TDOT have participated in similar projects such as South Church Street and Broad Street. The city's participation in this project will include the signal upgrades and pavement marking improvements for the additional travel lanes. The city will be required to match actual costs upon completion of the project. The city anticipates the construction cost of these improvements to be approximately $69,000. However, for project efficiency and in light of the current market conditions, as well as we haven't designed it yet, authority is requested to up to $100,000, which will be funded by State Street Aid. I'm available for any questions.
There are none. I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a double second.
Ms. Averwater,
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Mr. Kerr, if you can come back with a timeline where we can go from 3 to 7, or what is it, 5 to 7 lanes?
Excuse me?
You're talking about widening Old Fort Parkway, right?
Well, basically, we'll be resurfacing Old Fort Parkway from I-24 back to Carroll Drive.
Right.
And we'll be actually utilizing the shoulders as travel lanes.
Right.
So we'll resurface, the entire area.
Right. But we're picking up a lane.
And we're looking at, I think it's a March letting for this particular project.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we have a task order amendment for fiscal year 22 sewer rehabilitation. Mr. Gore.
Mayor McFarland, Council, thank you for the opportunity tonight. This is a engineering service order, task order amendment. Real quick, you kind of see our slide up here. We did a FY22 sewer rehab. These projects are primarily going in all over the city. Those little squares kind of represent the plan sheets of where we see sewer that needs the most attention with regards to repairing leaks and what we call infiltration and inflow into the sewer. We did have a project scope of around 3.3 million. That got adjusted to 4.2. The bids actually came in at 4.7. We never adjusted the engineering task order for resident project representation or inspection services or construction admin. So we're asking for that now in the amount of $91,500. That does bring the total engineering fee up to $531,000. So we would request your approval for this engineering services task order amendment. And I'm available for questions.
If no questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second, please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right,
Just
we'll
want to
move
make one
to,
point of clarification. The task order is correct, but the cover sheet said 80,000. It's actually, and the slide is correct. It's 91,500.
Okay.
So you,
Okay.
Thank you.
sure.
we now have task order fiscal year 23 sewer rehab water resources.
Wanted to take a real quick opportunity for the new council members just to kind of show them a 30,000-foot view here that we have 18 monitors that monitor flow in our sanitary sewer system. This is what we use for our sewer allocation annual report. We have dry weather flows and wet weather flows, and during the wet weather we have what's called infiltration and inflow. We take that information and we kind of break it down into temporary flow monitoring services. At times, this is an example of along Compton Road and Memorial Boulevard. What we do from there, this is how we ultimately design those rehab projects where we find the sewer that is in the most need of repair. This is just an example of an older project, but again, you can kind of see how it's kind of all across the city at various areas that we find needing repair. So we kind of reverse engineer this. We set a budget of around $4 million, and we try to design the project to meet that budget. In this case, for FY23, where the engineering inspection services proposal is for $475,500. This is even a little more detailed drawing of when we show the project. You can kind of see from the legend that we do have CIP, which is cured in place lining for the pipe. We do have laterals that are going into the house. We do have point repairs and so forth. The design is actually only about 30% of the $475,000. Construction admin and the RPR inspection are the primary costs associated with this, but we do like to go ahead and get the full engineering service task order approved at the $475,500. We will be coming back to you with bids at $4 million. We hope to get it close to that budget item, but it may be higher based on current pricing and inflation. So, but I'm available for questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Gore?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade? Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll need to go back and do item 14 that's on the consent agenda. This is purchase of data backup device and service support. Mr. Gore.
Yes, sir. This was just really a point of clarification. The contract, again, is correct in the packet that shows a total of $104,174.77. The communication form only has $55,000. That's just the hardware and year one maintenance. The contract represents a 3-year maintenance. So I just want to make sure that you understand we are talking about $104,174.77 over 3 years versus $55,000 over 1 year.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade? Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gore. All right, you have an appointment to the Disciplinary Review Board. This recommendation came from Human Services, Employee Services, sorry.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second, please call the roll. It's on your agenda.
It's on your agenda. It's in your packet.
Ms. Averwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move, any licensing?
Yes. 2 regular permits, one for an ownership change at 225 River Rock Road and a new location at 22 North Public Square. Both applicants have met requirements for permit and are recommended for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater?
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade,
Aye.
Mr. Wright,
Abstain.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to other business. Mr. Gerke.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. As you recall, in 2013, we adopted an airport layout plan, and in that plan, it identified some properties that lie currently within the runway protection zone, and that in the future, we would acquire those properties. One of those properties has come available, and we're requesting the authorized staff to obtain an appraisal of the property, to offer to purchase for the appraised value plus 10% to avoid condemnation, and acquire by condemnation if negotiations do not occur, to purchase if not successful. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to help you. I can answer the airport side, and David Ives will be assisting with the purchasing portion of this.
Is this on the DeJarnett side, or is this?
This is on the Northwood side and on the Harold Lane area.
Okay.
And I did share a map with you on that third page of that document.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Gerke?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater,
Aye.
Ms. Scales Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Mr. Gerke, I think you also have an event at the airport on
Yes.
Saturday.
Yes, Saturday, the airport is partnering up with the Discovery Center, and we're having a STEAM festival, and that is regarding science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And we have helicopters from the military coming in, different private aircraft coming in, and we're going to be really showcasing all those math, how we use math out at the airport and science and all that for in our everyday work, and share that with kids as they look to the future and look to see what they might want to do in their careers. So exciting day. It looks like we're going to have a good turnout. The city schools has really pushed this to their teachers, and appreciate their pushing that forward for us.
All
Thank you.
right. Any other business from staff? Any other business from council?
I'll just add, we plan to meet November the 3rd. It's the next meeting.
All right. I saw some really cool pictures this weekend. I think, Mr. Maxwell, you have a pretty interesting tie on. What would that be in reference to?
Well, it was the third Saturday in October, and it was nice to get a win, celebrate a little bit. My compadre was actually down on the field.
May or may not be on the field.
Plausible deniability.
You have pictures?
Lawyer approves.
Also want to say, on behalf of the entire council, Mr. Gore, you're in our thoughts and prayers. Your family is with the passing of your mom this week. So, all right. Seeing no other business, we'll stand adjourned.
saw,
I'm sorry.
You hanging from that goalpost.
Maybe.
I thought I saw you.
He's who broke it.
Oh, Lord.
He's got a piece of it in his living room now, so.
All right. With that, we'll stand adjourned.